Do you like traveling a lot, but you're a little worried about spending too much money or on a tight budget? Well, I have a ton of hacks on how to save money and travel all across Japan, and of course, experience all the things you want to do. So let's dive right in. Today, I'll be covering 5 different areas where you can save money when traveling, including accommodation, transport, food, attractions, and shopping. I want to give you a general tip which is going to save you a lot of money and go a long way, and that is avoid the peak season. So peak travel time in Japan is usually April, March when the cherry blossoms are in bloom, and nowadays also autumn leaf season, which is like late November, early December, as well as the ski season if you're going to Niseko, Hokkaido, which is in January and February. But other than that, there's actually a period throughout the year between about May through to September where it's the off season. And you can actually save so much money through accommodation if you come at this time of year. There are a few seasonal reasons why it's not ideal to travel, and that's because you have the rainy season, which falls around June, July, and there's typhoon season from about August through to October, and there's extreme heat in the summer. So my advice would be to pick either May or September, October, because they're generally the easiest months to enjoy weather-wise. You can go around in like light clothing and it shouldn't be as busy. Now it's time to talk about how we can save money on food. Yes, everyone loves food. So it's gonna be a big thing when you're traveling to want to spend and enjoy the local cuisine, which is something you absolutely need to do, but you don't need to break your bank to do it. Before anything, let me get one thing straight. Japanese food is so good. And you can't go wrong with it, from the budget end to the expensive end. Japanese chain restaurants are pretty good. I'm not the type of person who likes fast food, but in Japan, it's on a different level. So you can find a lot of budget options from all different types of Japanese food, from sushi to beef bowl to ramen, everything you can think of. So don't think that you have to go to like a famous restaurant. You can literally just go to any of these chains and get a whole meal for about 500 to 1,000 yen. And if it's your first time in Japan, you're probably gonna think everything tastes amazing anyhow. I actually made a video where I went to a bunch of chain restaurants, so you can check them out if you want to get some ideas. Another category that falls within the fast food is something called family restaurant, and they're meant to be like somewhere a family can eat and not break the bank. So they're perfect for budget travelers, and also the great thing is they usually have Wi-Fi, really cheap menus, drink bars where you can have all you can drink, and you can sit there with big groups of people. They have different kinds of food. Some are typical Japanese, American inspired, Japanese, Italian, so there's a wide variety of them out there. While you're walking around the streets of Japan, I do recommend checking out the local mom and pop shops to have a really nice home cooked style meal, or a little more authentic, which is where the locals will frequent. And if the locals are frequenting it, it's probably a lot cheaper than anywhere in the downtown touristy districts. One thing a lot of tourists don't realize is that a lot of restaurants in Japan, most of them actually, serve things called set meals, and at lunchtime and at breakfast they're often a lot cheaper and provide a lot more value for the customer. So for example, at Komeda Coffee, one of the coffee chains here, if you go in the morning for their morning service, you order any cup of coffee, you get a free slice of bread, side, as well as an egg, a boiled egg or whatever kind of egg you want. And it's all for the same price, only because it's in the morning. So if you were to go to a fancy restaurant at nighttime, you might be paying $150. But if you go at lunch, it's $50. So there's a lot of little hacks like that. And this ranges from, fast food restaurants to local shops to high-end restaurants. When you're trying to dine out, maybe try and go early in the day, have a big meal, and then have a lighter dinner. And then you can save a bit. When you want to go out for dinner, of course, izakaya is a typical thing that you should experience when traveling here, but not all of them have to be expensive or have a table charge, which is like an entry fee that a lot of places will make you pay. So you can go to places like Torikizoku or Hanbei, which are typical izakaya that a lot of university students will frequent, and everything on the menu is about like 200 or 300 yen. But you can probably eat to your heart's content for about 2,000 yen, depending on what you order. And drinks are also super cheap there too. Another thing that you can do to save money is dining at the standing restaurants inside stations. They're often like selling udon, ramen, soba. It's often a quick meal that you can just eat while you're on your way, and it's super cheap. It's like usually 300 to 600 yen, and it's a filling portion size. One of the biggest food hacks known by most locals living here is that if you go to the supermarket right before it closes, like 9 to 11 p.m, you're gonna get some great savings on the fresh food section. This will include things like bentos, onigiri, and you can save like 50%, 60% off, and it is a great way to just try some new food at a really affordable price. One thing I see a lot of my friends doing is actually making a poke bowl from the supermarket food. So you grab like the rice and then you grab the raw fish and you just add some soy sauce and then there you have it. You got a few veggies in there too. So that's something you can just make inside your hotel room as well, rather than eating it out at a restaurant. Of course, everyone wants to try the convenience store when traveling to Japan, but an unpopular opinion from me is that it's actually not that cheap. Especially if you consider like the amount of food and the nutritional value, like it's gonna keep you sustained for like an hour or two, but then you're gonna get hungry again. So of course you can go there and try the food and have like a nice snack throughout the day and maybe a dinner here and there. But one thing I do recommend is grabbing coffee. So coffee in Japan can be quite pricey, especially if you go to specialty stores or even the chains. It's gonna be anywhere between 300 to 900 yen. And if you go to the convenience store, you get the fresh coffee from the machine. It's usually between 90 to 250 yen, and it tastes pretty good. Out of all the convenience stores though, I recommend 7-Eleven. Finally, street food is a great way to experience lots of different types of Japanese food at a low cost. And of course, if you only ate street food, it would probably be a bit expensive, but if you have it here and there, it can be the perfect way to like have a snack and not break the bank. So you can get things like meronpan, which are usually better on the street, for example in Asakusa, than at bakeries. In Asakusa, it only costs 250 yen, whereas at a lot of bakeries, I've seen it for 400 yen and not as good. So street food isn't always necessarily more expensive than other places, so keep that in mind. Now, there are a couple of things that you should avoid when going out to eat, and this will include the following. Don't only eat at convenience stores or use vending machines to buy your food because they're generally going to be a lot more expensive, so go to the supermarket if you can to buy drinks as well as food. Avoid restaurants in touristy districts. It's common sense that these places are gonna charge more, and oftentimes they're not even as tasty as ones that are around the corner where no one else is. I personally would be a little cautious of any all-you-can-eat, all-you-can-drink, tabehodai, nomihodai offers because they'll be about 2,000 to 3,000 yen extra, and most people really don't drink enough to make it worthwhile. But if you think you can get the value out of it, go for it. But in my personal experience, it's always better to just order what you want. There's like a few exceptions where I think it's good, but most of the time, probably not. The next area where I think you can save a lot of money is transportation. And of course, there's lots of different ways you can travel across Japan, including train, local trains, bullet trains, rapid trains, bike, overnight bus, planes, ferries, cars, you name it. These days, there's been a lot of changes to the passes that you used to be able to get for trains, in particular the JR pass. It had about a 70% price hike, which really made it difficult to justify buying it because you'd be just making train trips for the sake of getting your value back. So before you buy any train passes, I highly recommend you research if it's really worth it. But there are quite a few that can save you a bit of money. One of my go-to train tickets that I'll get is the Puratto Kodama, which actually takes you from Tokyo to Kyoto by bullet train, but it's not the Nozomi, it's the slower version of that train. And it's still a bullet train, but it will take like maybe 60 minutes longer than the other one, and it will stop at more places. But I think it's worth saving, money if you have enough time to do so. The one catch is that you need to be organized and book this ticket at least 24 hours before your departure date, or a whole day before. But if you do manage to do it, I think you can save between 2,000 to 4,000 yen per journey, and it includes a free beverage on board that you pick out at one of the shops inside the Shinkansen gates. So that's a super easy way to just save a few thousand yen before going to Kyoto. Another thing to remember is they don't leave super early in the morning or leave super late at night. So it's only if you have like ample time and it works with your schedule. There are also a lot of day passes like the Kyoto bus as well as the Tokyo Metro. So depending on what you're doing that day, it may or may not be worth it, but you have to keep in mind that in Japan, there isn't just one train line company. There are so many, especially if you're in Tokyo or another city, because even Kyoto, they have the subway, but then you have the buses, and then you have like the actual train line. And for Tokyo, there's like probably 20 different train lines. So make sure that you're buying the one that you think you're gonna be using the most that day. Otherwise, you're just gonna be spending extra for no reason. When it comes to taxis, I personally would avoid them and don't think that Uber is going to be cheaper. In Japan, Uber is not cheaper. It's often more expensive than taxis. But of course, if you're in a big group of people, it might be worthwhile. The one time that myself and friends often use taxis is in Kyoto, and that's because the buses there are horrendous, and sometimes it's actually just faster to use a taxi to get across town, especially if you can split it amongst a few people. These days, a lot of people are aware of how cheap the overnight buses in Japan can be. For example, going from Tokyo to Osaka or Kyoto by night bus is often 3,000 to 6,000 yen, whereas the bullet train one way is about 14,000 to 15,000 yen, full price. So you can make some great savings, but you're going to lose a night's sleep, and sometimes it's just not worth it. I personally struggle a lot with that. So unless you can fall asleep like this and it doesn't bother you, I probably wouldn't recommend it. But what I actually do is take the day bus, and they are way better than night buses because you get to look out the window, you're comfortable, you don't arrive feeling like absolute shit. So if you have like a lot of time to spare, which not everyone does when they travel to Japan, I'd recommend doing that because they're often cheaper than the night buses too, because most people can't travel in the middle of the day. So if you're not time poor, day buses are where it's at. And there are a lot of day buses that don't even take 6-7 hours to get to places. You can travel to Nagano from Tokyo within a few hours, or do a few day trips to Mount Fuji. So keep in mind that day buses are actually a good way to reach certain destinations at a fraction of the price. When it comes to air travel, I'm sure most of you aren't coming to Japan by boat, so when you arrive in Tokyo, keep in mind that there are 2 international airports, Haneda and Narita. And Haneda is infinitely better because it's a lot closer to the center of the city, it's cheaper by train to get there, because I recently went to Narita and it was about 3,000 yen from my house to the airport, which is a 6,000 yen return trip, in comparison to Haneda, where I could get there with about 750 yen. Which return is about 1,400. Not even, it's like a third of the cost of getting to Narita. So this is really important. Try and book Haneda if you can, unless you have some business in the area like around Narita airport. When you land at the airport, you can also take public transport into the city. You don't have to take a taxi or take the bus. It's often quite cheap to just take the local trains, and you don't even need to have a fancy bullet train either. LCC carriers are a great way to save money when traveling to Japan, and I recently flew with Zip Air to Korea from Tokyo, and it was a fraction of the price compared to one of the major airlines like ANA or JAL. And JAL is actually the owner of Zip Air, so the quality of the flight and the flight attendants was really good, like way better than I would have expected of an LCC, and it even had a washlet inside. So make sure to keep those airlines in mind when you're traveling, because you can probably save a lot. But if you are flying into Japan with a company like ANA or JAL, I know they have a lot of campaigns where you can save money with domestic flights within Japan. Sometimes they're free. So take that into consideration when you pick out the airline to fly into Japan with. And also, of course, if you go with an LCC carrier, if you want to buy a lot of stuff, you're going to have to pay more when you're going home or arriving, because everything is an add-on. So you might just be better off going with a national carrier who won't make you pay extra for every kilo. One of my personal favorite ways to travel across Japan is by bicycle, and it's becoming quite common these days. You can do a lot of rental throughout like major cities like Tokyo, Kyoto, and there's a lot of companies popping up. But my go-to is Loop, because you can just rent them. There's so many stations and it's only about 200 or 300 yen per 30 minutes, and you can just zip across town. It's a great way to get to know the city, and you're not, on a train with 1,000 other people. Another underrated way to enjoy Japan is by walking. And of course, we all know walking is free. Japan is very walkable, especially Tokyo and Osaka, Kyoto, all the cities here, so walkable. You can get from places super quickly, depending on where you're at. For example, Shibuya to Harajuku, or Shinjuku to Shin-Okubo, or Tokyo to Ginza. You can walk between quite a few stations within an hour or less. And it's often a great way to discover new places you wouldn't have stumbled across and kind of see a less traveled by Japan. If these tips have helped you in any way, please give me a like and subscribe. It really helps my channel a lot. And I'm going to be covering a lot more of these tips in detail over on Patreon, including which travel passes to buy, which areas to stay in, and super cheap chain restaurants. So if you're interested, please check the link down below. And with that, let's keep moving on to the next topic. Of course, most people traveling to Japan need somewhere to stay, and accommodation is a huge amount of money that you're going to be spending every night, no matter where you're going. So there are different types of accommodation that you can enjoy here, ranging from capsule hotels to hostels to ryokan, business hotels, and of course just a normal Western hotel. Of course, business hotels, capsule hotels, and hostels are usually the cheapest option. When it comes to ryokan, the traditional Japanese inns, as well as a lot of Western hotels, they're going to be on the pricier end of things. But that doesn't mean that you can't experience the traditional Japanese tatami rooms, because there's a lot of places nowadays, especially in hostels, that offer this kind of experience. And you don't have to sleep with 20 other people. There are sometimes private rooms within hostels where you can have a tatami and you have the mat, you got the whole futon. So make sure you're just searching for all your options. And another kind of thing that I've noticed when searching for accommodation is if you share a toilet, you can definitely save money. And places I've done this before are Shibu Onsen in Nagano, as well as Hakone. The reason I bring this up actually is because there's been this huge movement across Japan for these kind of luxurious or fancier budget hostels. And being a solo traveler, I've actually stayed at my fair few share of hostels throughout different prefectures and different areas in Japan. Even in the countryside, you'll be surprised how many times you'll find a super modern, clean, affordable hostel. You have to keep in mind though that if you're at a hostel, you often might have to make your own bed, you won't have as much privacy. But if you're all about experience and saving money, it's a great way to do it, and you might make some friends along the way. Another similar thing to hostels is, of course, the, capsule hotel. And that's kind of an experience that a lot of people come here wanting to try. But unfortunately, because so many people want to try it, I do find that they're a lot pricier than they used to be. And if you're interested in some of the capsule hotels that you can find in Tokyo, as well as Kyoto, I recommend checking out my capsule video. I covered about 5 to 6 of them, and some of them were budget and some of them were more luxurious. When you're trying to save money and book your accommodation, what are some things you should look out for? Well, definitely make sure you book early. And if you're using a website like booking.com, you can also book and then cancel later with free cancellation. It's quite common in Japan, a lot of Japanese people do it, but you also need to keep your eyes peeled because the prices are often fluctuating, so make sure that you don't just book it and just forget about it. You probably can compare and then change around later if necessary. If you're okay to walk, if you pick a hotel a little further from the station, you can save a little bit of money as well. That's a common thing in Japan. It doesn't just apply to hotels, but apartments as well. The distance to the station, super important in determining price. Certain areas are also a lot cheaper. For example, I find that Asakusa in Tokyo, a lot cheaper. Even though it's a touristy district, it's just going to be cheaper than Shibuya, Shinjuku, because it's further away from the rest of Tokyo. But keep in mind that even if you pick an area that's cheap, are you going to be traveling by train every single day to make it back to the other side of the city? Because then your train fares are going to add up, and then you may have just been better off booking it in the downtown area that you wanted originally. So you really need to calculate how much you're going to spend traveling by train, etc., etc. So it's not just a matter of this area is cheaper, so I'm going to save money. Well, you might be spending 1,000, 2,000 yen each day trekking it out to wherever you're going. If you're going to be spending more than a week in Japan, you're probably going to need to do your laundry. And of course, some hotels offer these fancy cleaning services, but coin laundry is a huge thing here and they're everywhere. If you just search it in Google, so many places will come up, and a lot of hotels actually have them built inside the hotel themselves. For most of them, you're going to pay anywhere between 400 to 500 yen for a load of washing, and then maybe another 400 or 500 yen for the drying. So that's something that you can do to save some money. A lot of hotels here, of course, will offer the option to have a breakfast included in your stay. And sometimes it'll be 2,000, 3,000 yen. And honestly, I wouldn't be paying more than 500 yen for any breakfast unless there's something in particular you want to try, because you're probably going to save more by going out and having one of those early morning breakfast sets at a local cafe or restaurant, which is just going to be more bang for your buck and probably taste a lot better too. There is literally so much to do when you're visiting Japan, and attractions are a big part of most people's trip. But a lot of the trendy places that you'll see on social media do cost a fair bit, like Team Lab, Universal Studios Japan, Disneyland. They're all kind of pricey. But don't worry, because there are just as many affordable, budget-friendly, and free activities that you can do while you're traveling in Japan. And I really hope that this is helpful. Some of the free activities you can do in Japan include visiting temples and shrines. Yes, they are oftentimes free, and they're not even just like random ones on the street. Some of the most famous ones cost 0 yen to go inside, including somewhere like Meiji Jingu Shrine. That's free, and it's one of the most beautiful places in the middle of Tokyo. Or you've got places like Nezu Shrine, which has a line of the torii gates. It's like the Fushimi Inari of Tokyo. Fushimi Inari is also free, by the way. You've got the Imperial Palace in Tokyo and Kyoto. You've even got a place like Shiba Koen with the view of Tokyo Tower. One of my favorite things to do is actually get a view of Tokyo from above, and observation decks do cost money usually, like Shibuya Sky or Tokyo Skytree, but there are quite a few free places and you don't even have to pay a cent, like the Tokyo Government Building or even Shibuya Hikarie to get that iconic Shibuya Crossing view. And if you're smart with what you do, you can actually dine at one of these places and not pay anything extra. For example, Hoshino Coffee at Shibuya Crossing, not that popular. You just get in there and you've got a view of Shibuya Crossing and you're just having your coffee. So you just gotta like think outside the box and look up, and sometimes you'll find a really cool place to just have a good view and dine. Some months of the year have more festivals than others, but there's usually something or rather happening in Japan year round, and festivals are a great free activity. Of course, once you go to the festival, you might buy some street food or buy an item, but just to watch and enjoy, that's usually free. So you can go to things like the Koenji Awa Adori, which is the dance festival during the summer, or the Jimbocho Book Festival. Even the Sapporo Snow Festival is a free event to attend. So you can just look with your eyes and enjoy and take home nothing. There are quite a few gardens in Tokyo which you can get a little bit of peace and quiet at, and they don't really cost too much money. So Shinjuku Gyoen, it's only about 500 yen entry, or you can go to, of course, Ueno Park, Yoyogi Park, and just enjoy the nature that Tokyo has. Of course, if you're into enjoying nature, hiking, that's totally free as well, unless you want to climb Mount Fuji, which now costs money. But that's probably not the hike I would recommend. If you want to go close to Tokyo, somewhere like Takao-san, you just have to pay to get out there. So straight train from Shinjuku, you can go hike up that beautiful mountain and not have to pay anything crazy. At Takao-san, when you're done hiking, you can hop into the onsen, which is my next point I'd like to introduce. Super Sento's onsen, as well as hot springs, are one of the greatest ways to enjoy Japan's beauty, because it's so amazing just soaking in the hot springs. And mind you, you can do some of these hot springs for less than 500 yen, depending on the area, depending on how popular it is. Of course, some of these onsen experiences, if you pick a private one, they're gonna cost you a lot, especially if you're in a ryokan and it's a private little one part of your room. Yeah, that might not be too budget friendly. However, there are so many that have all day onsen experiences, like they're called Super Sento, and you literally pay like 1,000 to 2,000 yen and you can stay there all freaking day. And I do that throughout the winter and autumn time just to refresh my mind and relax. So all you need to bring is like your own towel, because sometimes they'll charge more. And then you just pay entry and you can go in and out of the onsen. They have manga that you can read for free. Oftentimes it's only Japanese, so maybe bring your own book. They have an in-dining area usually, and the food's never too expensive. It's usually between 500 to 1,000 yen, so super affordable. And it's a great way to spend like a whole day doing a pretty reasonably priced experience, if you ask me. And it's very Japanese, and it's something I feel like most tourists should at least try once in their life. Another all-day activity is like an amusement center, like Round 1. And these are usually in like kind of outskirts of Tokyo, outskirts of the city areas, like more countryside, because they need like a lot of space. But essentially you'll just pay like 2,000 or 3,000 yen and you'll have access to the entire area for the day. And it's great if you go in a big group of friends, because you can just do a bunch of things like karaoke, you can go bowling, I think they have bowling, skating, roller skating, and they have like all the arcade machine games. It often includes a drink bar, so you can get like Coke and Calpis, melon soda. If you're only wanting to do a little bit of that arcade experience, you can just walk into any of them throughout Japan. And honestly, even if you just throw a few hundred yen at the machines and play a few crane games, take some purikura, which are the photo booth photos, is part of the experience. And I don't think it's wasted money unless you get addicted to crane games and spend all your money, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 yen. It's totally within reason to just give it a go and have some fun. Otherwise, if you want like a guaranteed win with your money, you can do gacha gacha, which are the capsule machines, and you're definitely gonna get something. If it's one you want, maybe not, because it's random. Otherwise, you can do karaoke, and if you go on the weekday in the middle of the day, it's usually very, very, very cheap because obviously no one living here can usually go at that time. I think it's like the all day rate is like 1,500 yen and you get like a drink bar. Sometimes it's 700 yen. And so you can just sing for like 8 hours. I don't know who can sing for that long, but you can just spend your time in the karaoke booth with free unlimited drinks all of the time. But if you want to save money, do not go late in the evening or on weekends because that's when they really up the price. Especially if you're in like a touristy area like Shinjuku, I think the karaoke places charge more. But there are some with really cool views of like Shinjuku city, so that's one cool thing. A couple of budget activities that you can pay for here are things like the Ghibli Museum. I think it's only like 1,000 yen to go inside. Of course, booking it is another struggle because it sells out super quick, but if you can, it's a budget activity. Other than that, they also have the Edo Tokyo Open Air Museum, super cheap to get into, or there's the free Suginami Animation Museum as well. If you do plan to do any of the expensive or very popular tourist attractions, my tip is to book early online so you can, number one, guarantee you can do it, and also booking online usually saves you a few hundred yen. For example, Shibuya Sky as well as Team Lab. And you're going to avoid disappointment because the lines on the day are usually so long and it's either sold out or just, yeah, crazy wait time. The final category is shopping! Who doesn't like shopping? If you're into characters, anime, video games, oh my god, there is just so much you can find here and not everything is going to be expensive. The good news is if you're an actual tourist and not living here, you can do tax-free shopping, which is commonly known. So make sure when you're going out, you do carry your passport. You're legally required to, but make sure you have it so you can get your tax-free shopping on top as well. You just have to spend, I think, a minimum of 5,000 yen at an eligible store and you get all that tax removed and you get to save lots of money that way. My biggest piece of advice when shopping here is go secondhand shopping. You can save so much money and find some of the coolest stuff. And of course you can do this in physical stores themselves, like, you know, thrifting, which is popular in areas like Shimokitazawa, which is more expensive. So I recommend going to like a local neighborhood and checking out some of the chains. You can find places like Book Off, Mode Off, Heart Off, I know it's a weird name, as well as Trayfac Fashion, Second Street. There's so many places you can buy like clothes, books at, but you can also go to flea markets, which are held on weekends in most cities of Japan, and you can find some antiques, you can find kimono. That's one of my favorite things to buy secondhand here is like traditional kimono that sometimes if you go to a touristy area, they're selling these secondhand kimono for 5,000, 10,000 yen. You go to a flea market, they're 500 yen. Of course, there's even secondhand camera stores like Kitamura Camera. It's honestly endless. So if you're thinking to buy a certain item, just do a quick Google search. Is there a secondhand store for this? And you might actually come away with saving like quite a few of your yen. But these days, some areas are actually so trendy and unknown for secondhand shopping, like Shimokitazawa, that it's become more expensive. Or even a place like Super Potato in Akihabara, which had secondhand video games. It's now been jacked up to suit like the demand of and the supply of all the tourists. So keep that in mind, that just because it's secondhand doesn't mean it's necessarily cheaper. If you do prefer to buy your items brand new, there are great options for clothing in particular in Japan, like Uniqlo. Don't sleep on that. That is so good. I live and die by their heat tech, which if you're traveling during the winter, go get some inner layers at Uniqlo. When it comes to food and beauty, you can actually pick up a lot of it at your local chemist, like pharmacy, as well as a place like Donkey. Donkey is a haven for shopping and it's, you know, tax-free, it's super convenient, it's like basically a shop for anything and everything. It is a little overwhelming though, but you can find all your beauty goods in there and it's usually pretty reasonable depending on what you get, but they do sell like high-end products as well. If you're looking for food, you can also grab it just at the supermarket. You can just get what the locals are eating and that's oftentimes what your friends back home are going to be most excited about, just like the local food, the authentic food. When it comes to 100 yen stores, check out Daiso, or you can also check out Standard Products, which is their like fancier version, and that's like about 300 to 700 yen, I think, per item. I actually did a shopping video for souvenirs, so you can check that out here as well if you want to get more ideas, and it was like from budget to like more expensive things. When you're buying your souvenirs, make sure to not buy them at the airport because they really up the price there. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just gonna get my snacks at the airport. I'm gonna just save time, but yeah, sure, you might save time, but you're gonna pay like way more. Like it's considerably more expensive at the airport, and of course the options are more limited. So I do recommend getting them just like in the town. Do you have any money saving tips while traveling Japan? Help us all save and tell us down below. But that was my comprehensive list. What did you think? Is there anything I'm missing? I love saving money when I travel, so I hope this was helpful and could give you even just 1 yen of savings. Like and subscribe for more, and check out my Patreon video if you want further tips with super detailed information. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!